issued a warrant for Reagan's arrest as he's obviously an accomplice in this murder, but he has disappeared. He was last seen with the defense counsel, and I would like to...
Keep your shirt on. Who's disappeared? What do you suppose I'm here for? Just to give you guys a thrill? You don't have to issue any warrants. I'll stay here. If she's guilty, I'm guilty.
Defense may proceed.
Karen, Andre. Miss Andre, when you took the stand earlier today, did you know the whole truth about this case?
No.
Do you wish to retract any of your testimony?
No.
When you first took the stand, did you intend to shield anyone?
Yes.
Whom?
Bjorn Faulkner.
Do you still find it necessary to shield him?
No. It's not necessary anymore.
Do you still claim that Bjorn Faulkner committed suicide?
No. Bjorn Faulkner did not commit suicide. He was murdered. I did not kill him. Please believe me. Not for my sake. I don't care what you do to me now. But because you cannot let his murder remain unpunished. I'll tell you the whole truth. I lied at the inquest. I've lied to my own attorney. I was going to lie here, but everything I told you so far has been true. I'll tell you the rest.
You had started telling us of Mr. Faulkner's way out of his difficulties, Miss Andre.
I told you that he was going to leave the world, but he was not to kill himself. I did throw a man's body off the penthouse, but that body was dead before I threw it. It was not Bjorn Faulkner.
Please explain this to us, Miss Andre.
Bjorn wanted to be officially dead. No searches or investigations were to bother him. He was to disappear. That suicide was staged. He had had the plan in mind for a long time. He had kept $10 million of the Whitfield forgery for this. We needed someone to help us, someone who could not be connected with Bjorn in any way. There was only one such person, Reagan.
And what made you believe that Mr. Reagan would be so willing to help in such a dangerous undertaking?
He loved me.
And he agreed to help you in spite of that?
He agreed because of that.
What was the plan, Miss Andre?
Reagan was to get a corpse, but he wasn't to kill anyone for the purpose. We waited. On the night of January 16th, Lefty O'Toole, a gunman, was killed by rival gangsters. His murderers have since been arrested and have confessed, so you can be sure that Reagan had nothing to do with the murder. But you may remember reading in the papers that O'Toole's body disappeared mysteriously from his mother's house. That was Reagan's work. O'Toole's height, measurements, and hair were the same as Bjorn's. He was the man I threw off the penthouse.
Was that the extent of Mr. Reagan's help?
No. He was to get an airplane and take Bjorn to South America. Bjorn had never learned to operate a plane. Reagan used to be a transport pilot. That day, January 16th, Bjorn transferred the $10 million to 3 banks in Buenos Aires in the name of Ragnar Eden. A month later, I was to meet him at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. Until then, the three of us were not to communicate with each other. No matter what happened, we were not to reveal the secret.
Tell us what happened on January 16th, Miss Andre.
Bjorn came to my house that night. I'll never forget his smile when he stepped out of the elevator. He loved danger. We had dinner together. At 9:30, we went to Reagan's. He had O'Toole's body dressed in traveling clothes. We drove back to my house. Bjorn wanted to be seen entering the building, so I didn't use my key. I rang the doorbell. We were dressed formally to make it look like a gay party. Bjorn and Reagan supported the body as if we were a drunken friend. The night watchman opened the door, then we went up in the elevator.
And then what happened?
Bjorn exchanged clothes with the corpse. He wrote the letter. Then they carried the body out and left it leaning against the parapet. Then we said goodbye. Bjorn was to go first. He went down in the elevator. I stood and watched the needle of the indicator moving down, 50 floors down. Then it stopped. He was gone.
And then?
Reagan followed him a few minutes later. They were to meet 10 miles out of the city, where Reagan had left his plane. I stood alone for an hour. The penthouse was so silent, deodorant from his body. There was a clock by the bed, and it ticked in the darkness. I waited. When an hour passed, I knew that the plane had taken off. I got up, I tore my dress to make it look like a struggle. Then I went out to the garden, to the parapet. I looked down. There were so many lights. The world seemed so small, so far away. Then I threw the body over. I watched it fall. I thought all of Bjorn's troubles went with it. I didn't know that his life went too.
That is all, Miss Andre.
I must confess, Miss Andre, that there is not much left to do. You have done all my work yourself. Now tell us, didn't Mr. Faulkner have a clear conception of the difference between right and wrong?
Bjorn never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was only you can or you can't. He always could.
And yourself, didn't you object to helping him in all those crimes?
To me, it was only he wants or he doesn't.
You said Bjorn Faulkner loved you.
Yes.
Did he ever ask you to marry him?
No. What for?
Don't you know that there are laws made for situations such as these?
Laws made by whom, Mr. Flint, and for whom?
Miss Andre, didn't your lawyer warn you that anything you said in the court may be held against you?
I am here to tell the truth.
You loved Bjorn Faulkner,
Yes,
such as he was?
because he was such as he was.
Exactly, Miss Andre! Now tell us, what would you do if a woman were to take away from you the man you worshipped so insanely? If she appealed to his soul, not his animal desires, such as you did so successfully? If she changed the ruthless scoundrel of a man into an ideal upright man, would you still love him?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained! But I want to answer. I want the district attorney to know that he is insulting Bjorn Faulkner's memory.
You do, but you thought nothing of insulting him while he was alive by having an affair with a gangster.
You darn! Don't, Larry. You're mistaken, Mr. Flint. Reagan loved me. I didn't love him.
And he didn't demand the usual price for his services.
He demanded nothing.
You were the only one who knew of all the crimes Faulkner committed.
Yes.
You had enough information to send him to jail at any time.
I'd never do that.
But you could, if you wanted.
I suppose so.
Well, Miss Andre, isn't that the explanation for Faulkner's visit to you after his marriage? He had reformed. He wanted to avoid a crash. But you held it over his head. You could ruin his plans and expose him before he made good on his crimes. Wasn't it fear, not love, that held him in your hands?
Bjorn never knew the meaning of the word fear.
Miss Andre, who knew about the transfer of $10 million to Buenos Aires?
Only Bjorn, myself, and Reagan.
And Reagan! Now, Faulkner could have had perfectly legitimate business reasons for that transaction.
I don't know of any.
You mean you won't tell us of any? Now, Miss Andre, Bjorn Faulkner kept you in extravagant luxury for 10 years. You enjoyed platinum gowns and other little things like that. You hated to change your mode of living. You hated to see him turn his fortune over to investors. To see him poor, didn't you?
I was never to see him poor.
No! Of course not! Because you and your gangster lover were going to murder him and get the $10 million no one knew about.
Your Honor, we object.
Sustained!
You heard it testified that Faulkner had no reason to commit suicide. He had no more reason to escape from the first happiness he'd ever known. And you hated him for that happiness, didn't you?
You don't understand Bjorn Faulkner.
Maybe I don't. But let me see if I understand you. You were taken by a man the first day you saw him. You lived in a blazingly illicit relationship for 10 years. You defrauded thousands of investors the world over. You cultivated a friendship with a notorious gangster. You helped in a $25 million forgery. You told us all of this proudly, flaunting your defiance of all decency. And you expect us to believe you not capable of murder?
You're wrong, Mr. Flint. I am capable of murder. For Bjorn Faulkner's sake.
That is all, Miss Andre.
Lawrence Reagan.
Lawrence Reagan.
What is your name?
Lawrence Reagan.
And what is your occupation?
Unemployed.
How long have you known Karen Andre?
5 months.
And where did you meet her?
The Falcon's office. I went there to do some business with him. I gave up the business because I met his secretary.
And how did you happen to become friendly with Miss Andre?
Well, that first meeting wasn't exactly friendly. She wouldn't let me in to see Faulkner. She said I had enough money to buy orchids by the pound and had no business with her boss. I said I'd think it over and went. I thought it over, only I didn't think of the business. I thought of her. Next day I sent her a pound of orchids. Ever seen how many that makes? That's how it started.
And did you know of Miss Andre's relations with Mr. Faulkner?
Knew it before I ever saw her. What of it? I knew it was hopeless, but I couldn't help it.
You never expected Miss Andre to share your feelings?
No.
You never made any attempt to force it upon her?
Do you have to know all that?
I'm afraid we do.
I kissed her once, by horse. It was the night of Faulkner's wedding. She was alone, unhappy, and I was crazy about her. She told me it was no use. I never wanted her to know, but she knew. We never mentioned it since.
When did Miss Andre first tell you of Faulkner's planned escape?
About 2 weeks before we pulled it.
Was Lefty O'Toole one of your men?
No.
Were you connected with his murderers in any way?
No.
You actually had no definite knowledge on his planned murder?
No, just had a way of guessing.
What happened on the night of January 16th?
It all worked as Miss Andre has told you, but she knows only half the story. I know the rest.
Tell us what happened after you left the penthouse.
I left 10 minutes after Faulkner. He had taken my car. I had one of my men leave another car for me at the door. I stepped on it, full speed.
And where did you go?
To Meadow Lane, about 10 miles out in Kings County. We had left my plane there earlier in the evening. Faulkner was to get there first and wait for me.
And what time did you get there?
About midnight. There was a bright moon. I turned off the road and could see tire tracks in the mud where Faulkner's cars passed. Drove out into the lane and thought I'd lost my mind. The plane was gone.
What did you do?
Searched around that lane for 2 hours. Faulkner's car was there, where we had agreed to hide it. It was empty, lights turned off, key in the switch. I could see tracks on the ground where the plane had taken off, but Faulkner didn't fly it himself.
Did you search for any clues to this mystery?
Searched like a bloodhound.
And did you find anything?
I did. One thing, a car.
What kind of a car?
It was hidden deep in the bushes on the other side of the lane. A big black sedan.
And what did you do?
Well, I wanted to know whose car it was. So I smashed the window, climbed into the back seat, and settled down to wait.
And how long did you have to wait?
The rest of that night,
And then?
then the owner came back. I saw him coming. His face looked strange. He had no hat, and his clothes were wrinkled, grease-spotted.
And what did you do?
I pretended to be asleep in the back seat. I watched him. He approached, opened the door. Then he saw me. He gave a start and a yell as if he'd been struck in the heart. His nerves must have been jittery.
Then what did you do?
I awakened with a start, stretched, rubbed my eyes, and said, "Oh, it's you. Fancy such a meeting. Don't think you like it." He said, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And I said, "My name's Gus Reagan. You may have heard it. I was in a little trouble and had to hide for a while. Finding his car here was quite a convenience." He said, "Well, that's too bad. I'll have to ask you to get out. I'm in a hurry."
And did you get out?
No. I pretended to be asleep for a while longer. Woke up, then, well, I don't know quite how to
Well, did you ask him any questions? Did he explain anything to you?
He asked me, "What are you doing here?" I asked, "What's the hurry?" He said, "None of your business." I said, "Well, it's not for me, you see. It happens that a certain columnist is a friend of mine. He'll appreciate the story about a gentleman of your prominence found wandering in the wilderness at milkman time. But I'm sure he'd like to have the whole story."
And what did the man say?
Nothing. He took out a checkbook and looked at me. I shrugged, looked at him. Then he said, "Would $10,000 be a suitable token of appreciation to keep your mouth shut?" I
it, Mr. Reagan?
I put it in my pocket and thanked him. Then I drew my gun, stuck it in his ribs, and asked, "Now, you lousy bastard, what'd you do with Faulkner?" He opened his mouth like a fish chokingly. Couldn't make a sound.
Your Honor, is this man allowed to make such statements in public, in my presence?
The witness is allowed to testify. If it is proven to be perjury, he will suffer the consequences. Proceed, Mr. Stevens.
What did he answer, Mr. Reagan?
At first, he muttered, "I don't know what you're talking about," but I jammed the gun harder and said, "Cut it out. I have no time to waste. I'm in on it, and so are you. Where'd you take it?" He said, "If you kill me, you'll never find out."
Did you get any information out of him?
Not a word. I didn't want to kill him, yet. He said, "If you kill me and expose me, you'll expose the fake suicide, and Faulkner will be found out." I asked, "Is he alive?" He said, "Go and ask him." I talked and threatened. It was no use. I let him go. I thought I could always get him.
Then did you try to find Mr. Faulkner?
Didn't lose a second. I flew home, changed my clothes, grabbed a sandwich and an airplane, then flew to Buenos Aires. I searched, advertised in the papers, got no answer. No one called the banks for Ragnar Keaton's millions.
Did you try to communicate about this with Miss Andre?
No. We had promised to stay away from each other for a month, and she had been arrested for Faulkner's murder. I had laughed when I read that. I couldn't say a word. Not to betray him if he were still alive. So I waited.
And what were you waiting for?
February 16th, at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. I set my teeth and waited every minute, every hour of that day. He didn't come. Then I knew he was dead. I flew back to New York, started to search my plane, and we found it yesterday.
Where did you find it?
In a deserted valley in New Jersey, about 100 miles from Meadow Lane. I recognized the plane by the engine number. It had been landed and fire set to it.
Was the plane empty?
No, it had the body of a man in it.
Could you identify him?
No one could. It was nothing but a burned skeleton, but the height was the same. It was Faulkner. I examined the body, or what was left of it, and found 2 bullet holes, one in a rib over the heart, and the other straight through the right hand. He didn't die without putting up a fight. He must have been disarmed first, shot with the hand, then murdered, defenseless, straight through the heart.
That's all, Mr. Reagan.
Just what is your business, Mr. Reagan?
You'd like me to answer that, wouldn't you?
We object, Your Honor. The witness has a right not to answer that question.
Sustained.
Mr. Reagan, what do you do when prospective clients refuse to pay your protection?
I'm legally allowed to not understand what you're talking about.
Very well. You don't have to understand. May I question you as to whether you read the newspapers?
You may
Well,
question me.
do you read the newspapers?
Occasionally.
Then did you happen to read that when Mr. James Sutton Vance Jr. refused to pay protection to a certain gangster, his magnificent country house in Westchester was destroyed by an explosion just after the guests left, barely missing a wholesale slaughter? What was that, Mr. Reagan? A coincidence?
A remarkable coincidence, Mr. Flynn. Just after the guests had left.
Did you read that when Mr. Van Dorn refused to...
We object, Your Honor. Such questions are irrelevant.
Sustained.
So you had no ill feeling toward Mr. Faulkner for the failure of your business?
No.
Now, Mr. Guts Reagan, I beg your pardon. Mr. Lawrence Reagan, what would you do if someone were to take the woman you love so much?
I'd cut his throat with a dull saw.
You would! And you don't expect us to believe you, Guts Reagan, outlaw, gangster, scum of the underworld, would step aside with a grand gesture and throw the woman you wanted into another man's arms?
Your Honor!
I loved her.
You did? Why did you allow Mr. Faulkner to visit her after his marriage?
I had nothing to say about that.
No, you didn't know the blackmail plot over his head?
Got any proof of that?
Her association with you is the best proof!
Objection!
Sustained.
How did you kill Faulkner in his penthouse?
Objection!
Sustained.
Where is your other accomplice? The one who played the drunk?
I can give you his exact address. Evergreen
on the burned plane is pure Faulkner.
Yes.
And what is to prove it isn't the other way around? Supposing you did steal O'Toole's body, what's to prove that you didn't stage a fantastic thing yourself? That you didn't plant the airplane in the body in New Jersey, and then appear with this wild story in a desperate attempt to save your mistress? You've heard her tell us that you'd do anything for her, that you'd lie for her.
We object, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
What's your real proof, Mr. Reagan?
Mr. Flynn, you're a district attorney, and I, well, you know what I am. We both have a lot of dirty work to do. Such happens to be life, for most of it. But do you think we're both so low that if something passes us to which one kneels, we no longer have eyes to see it? I loved her, she loved Faulkner. That's our only proof.
That's all, Mr. Reagan.
John Graham Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, would you object if I requested an order to exhume the body buried in Evergreen Cemetery?
I would have no objection when that body has been cremated.
I see. Mr. Whitfield, where were you on the night of January 16th?
I believe I was in New York on business that night.
Do you have any witnesses that can confirm it? Well?
Mr. Stevens, I must realize that I am not in the habit of providing myself with any witnesses. I have never had reason to keep track of my activities. I would not be able to find them now.
How many cars do you own, Mr. Whitfield?
4.
And what are they?
One of them is a black sedan, as you are evidently anxious to learn. I may remind you that it is not the only black sedan in New York City.
You just returned from California by plane.
Yes.
You flew it yourself?
Yes,
You're a licensed pilot then.
I am.
Now, that story of Mr. Reagan's is nothing but a lie, in your opinion, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Then who wrote that check?
I did.
Will you kindly explain it?
It is very simple. We all know Mr. Reagan's profession. He had threatened to kidnap my daughter. I preferred to pay him off, rather than to take any chances on her life.
That check is dated January 17th. On that same day, you announced your offer of a reward for Reagan's arrest, didn't you?
Yes, you realize that besides my civic duty, I also had my daughter's safety in mind and wanted prompt action.
Mr. Whitfield, your daughter and your fortune are your most cherished possessions, aren't they?
They are.
Then what would you do to the man who took your money and deserted your daughter for another woman?
We object, Your Honor!
Objection sustained.
You hated Faulkner. You wanted to break. You suspected his intention of staging a suicide, didn't you? The words Miss Youngquist heard you say prove it.
I suspected nothing of the kind.
And on January 16th, didn't you spend the day watching Faulkner?
Certainly not.
Weren't you trailing Faulkner in your black sedan?
Fantastic. How could I have recognized him? Supposing it were Faulkner leaving, Van Fleet, the detective, didn't.
Van Fleet wasn't watching for a trick. He had no suspicion of the plot. You had.
My dear Mr. Stevens, how could I have known about the plot for that night?
Didn't you have any particular information about Faulkner's activities at the time?
None.
You heard nothing unusual that day.
Not a thing.
For instance, you did not hear of a $10 million transfer to Buenos Aires.
I never did.
I killed him. I killed Bjorn Faulkner. God help me. I helped that man kill him. The whole truth. So help me God. I didn't know, but I see it now. He killed Faulkner because he lied. He knew about the $10 million transfer because I told him.
Now look here, woman! You can't...
That's all, Mr. Whitfield.
No questions!
Kindly take the stand, Miss Youngquist. You told Whitfield about that transfer.
He asked me many times about the $10 million, where it was spent. I did not know it was a secret. That day, I told him about Buenos Aires. That day, at noon, January 16th.
What kind of frame up is this?
You told Whitfield. At noon?
I did. God have pity on me. I didn't know. I would give my life for Eric Faulkner, and I helped to kill him.
That's all.
Were you alone with Mr. Whitfield when he told you this?
Yes.
Then it's your word against his?
Yes.
That is all.
The defense rests.
Any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
The defense may proceed with the closing argument.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are here to decide the fate of a woman. But much more than one woman is here on trial. Before you pronounce your verdict on Karen Andre, think of your verdict on Bjorn Faulkner. Do you believe that he was the kind of man who would bow, renounce, and repent? If you do, she's guilty. But if you believe that in this sad, half-hearted world of ours, a man can still be born with life singing in his veins, a scoundrel, a swindler, a criminal, call him anything, but still a conqueror. If you can admire a man who, no matter what mistakes he may have made in form, had never lost his respect, his self-esteem, if you know a motor that is its own strength, an audacity that is its own law, a spirit that is its own vindication, you'll understand Bjorn Faulkner. And if you do, you'll understand the woman who is his priestess. Who's on trial here today? Karen Andre? No. It's you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, who are here on trial and whose souls will be brought to light when your decision is rendered.
The district attorney may now conclude the case.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for once, I agree with the defense counsel. Two different types of humanity are opposed in this case, and your verdict will depend on which one you choose to believe. You are asked by the defense to take the side of a swindler, a harlot, and a gangster against a man who is the model of social responsibility, and a woman who is everything the ideal of womanhood has been for centuries. On one side, you have a life of service, duty, and unselfishness. On the other, a steamroller of sensual indulgence and egoistic ambition. I agree with the defense counsel that the judgment on this case will be passed deep within your own souls. If you believe that love is not just sexual indulgence, if you believe that love is not confined to your bedroom, but extends to your family and your fellow men, if you believe that selfless service to others is still the most sacred ideal a man can aspire to, then you will believe that simple virtue is more powerful than arrogance, and a man like Bjorn Faulkner would be brought to bow before it. Let your verdict tell us that none shall raise a head too high in defiance of our common standards.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the bailiff will now escort you to the jury room. I shall ask you to consider your verdict carefully. You are to determine whether Karen Andre is guilty or not guilty of the murder of Bjorn Faulkner.
I'm gonna open it and stick it back. I was called to examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner. I found a body mangled to an extreme degree.
He was a bit tight. He wasn't very steady on his feet. Mr. Faulkner and the other gentleman had to help him. They almost dragged him into the elevator.
She's hoisting a man's body up on the parapet. A man in evening clothes. Faulkner. He's unconscious, no resistance. She pushes him over the parapet down to space.
I found only two enjoyable things on this earth whose every door was open. My whip over the world and Karen Andre.
He had a platinum gown made for her. She wore on her naked body. And she laughed like the pagan she is. And he kissed the bird, wild like tiger.
We have renounced material concerns, with all their consequences. Pride, selfishness, ambition, the desire to rise above our fellow men. We have devoted our life to spiritual values. We are planning to leave the city, to be part of some modest community, to be like everyone else.
I had full confidence that my business acumen would have prevented the crash had Faulkner lived.
It is not probable that the letter has been forged, but it is possible.
Herr Faulkner had shrugged and said lightly, "Oh, commit suicide." Herr Whitfield looked at him and said, very slowly, "If you do, be sure you make a good job of it." Bjorn Faulkner never thought of things as right or wrong. To him, it was only, you can or you can't. He always could. To me, it was only, he wants or he doesn't. But do you think we're both so